Well, hello everyone, and welcome to a very special day for my channel, Six Elemental Interviews. I actually have three absolutely incredible creatives today that I'll be speaking to at 8, 11, and 1 p.m. Eastern, respectively. It's 8 a.m. on my side of the world. Good morning, everybody, and for those on other parts of the world, such as my esteemed guest, Mr. Hardie, good afternoon. I'm P.L. Stewart. This is Drum King Saga at 7847. And the first interview I'll have today is a dear friend of mine. If any of you have watched the Marmite broadcast that we had a couple months back, I first really became, Tim and I became close as we bonded over our quirky little unique online group of authors in the writing community, led by the wonderful Holly Tinsley. And over the years, I've got to know Tim. He's such a fantastic person, and of course, an extremely talented and gifted writer. And so today we're here to talk mostly about his writing, especially his main series, The Brother of the Eagle, which, congratulations, Tim, is now finished. That is quite the accomplishment. So I'll just quickly let Tim say hi and introduce himself, and then we'll get into the interview itself.
Yeah, I think you've covered everything there, PL. Thanks very much for having me on, first of all. Really appreciate it. It's always really, really nice to have a chat with you. And so we're here today to talk about the Brotherhood of the Eagle series, and yes, like you said, a complete series, which is still something I'm getting used to at the moment.
Well, I can say that I was privileged. Thank you so much again for gifting me with an advanced reader copy of Broken Brotherhood, the final book in the tetralogy. I was blown away. There's so many things I want to ask you about this series, but I do want to say that just give you that ultimate compliment that, Tim, it was fantastic overall, and you really stuck the landing. And that's something that I think
this could be a really short broadcast. If you know what, Tim, I didn't like it. It was just dreadful.
Yeah, and I realize that I've only read so many complete, especially indie self-published fantasy series, and I really lament that. And I guess partially now, in all fairness, part of that is because most of the series I've read are not completed yet by the authors. So, and the other part, of course, is that I simply haven't read, I haven't selected for my reading a lot of completed indie fantasy series. They are out there, and some very popular ones. But I want to ask you, because now I'm sure that it's a huge relief. It's almost like a huge weight off your shoulders. But also, I'm sure perhaps there's a sense of sadness that, I know that you have a lot of short stories in the universe of the Brotherhood of the Eagle. I know you perhaps have some other things planned in that universe, but you leave the bulk of these characters behind. Of course, some of them don't make it out of the final book, and some have passed in the preceding books. But what is it like, to actually finish the series, and especially knowing that, it'll be the last time you have some of these characters, in your head and chatting with them. And how's it feel?
Yeah, it is a mixed feeling. I've actually gone to the trouble of actually bringing the books up, so I will waive them. Or try to, because it's quite heavy. But that's what a completed series looks like, actually. So every now and again, I look at my bookshelves and think, "Wow, that's actually happened." And in fact, the final book, which is Broken Brotherhood, I know it's on the screen, but I'm quite delighted to have a physical copy, because my first batch, they got destroyed in transit. So I've only actually had the book myself in the final copy for about 3 or 4 days now. So that's it didn't entirely. It sounds weird, but that book didn't feel finished till I actually had the final copy in my hand, and you knew it wasn't full of blank pages. Something dreadful had gone on in formatting somewhere. So that's so that's good. So yeah, I think you kind of half answer the question away, because you're right. It's sort of, we spend a long time in these series. You'll be very familiar with this from your own projects, and you want to get to the end, but once you get to the end, it is the end. So sort of by definition, I kind of know I won't be going back, even with the things like the short stories you mentioned, stuff like that. Most of those, a few sort of like adjacent to the main story, but most of them actually I've deliberately relocated them. It's different times, it's different clans or different settings entirely. So that's not really the same. That's not really a continuation in the same way. It's more of an expansion. And yeah, getting to the end of Broken Brotherhood was a strange experience because it was a very easy book to write that was very, very difficult to write from an emotional point of view, because I knew what I was doing with that fourth installment, and I felt ready and capable of writing it and closing out all those different story arcs. And you're right, spoiler alert, some people are going to die in this series. It's been fairly common. It wasn't going to change in Broken Brotherhood, but then in a weird way, everyone's dead for me, if that makes sense, because, and I can't say any names, but because we've got to the end of the tale, very likely a lot of these central characters, even the side characters like we kind of grew to love, I might never write them again. Now, I'm not going to say absolutely definite I will never, not return to this world. And I think if you read the book, you'll see there's definitely an opportunity to expand or continue a tale based on the events that have happened in the first 4 books. But that doesn't feel to me like an immediate project at all. And so at the moment, it kind of feels like every single one of them has had their time, and I'm closing the door on that chapter of writing. And that's a chapter that's got, I started that series in 2011 with Hall of Bones. So that's been a 13-year writing journey that's just come to an end. So yeah, it feels great. It feels good. I think, God, I can finish a series. It can be done. But at the same time, it's, I think there's an emotional toll to that, a creative toll to that. I don't feel like writing at the moment, I have to say. So I finished all the edits and stuff in October. I've not really written anything creative in the last couple of months. I think partly just because I needed to give myself that break to sort of absorb finishing it, what that means, and make sure I pick my next project wisely, really, I suppose.
And that would be a very well-deserved break. Again, the series is outstanding. And I guess I didn't even do the calculations, the math, to realize that, that's more than a decade-long endeavor for you, right? And that's a long time. That's a big chunk of anyone's life. And, consider the way you started. I mean, you started off of the gate with, SBFBO winning first book. SBFBO, sorry, finalist, first book.
Yeah, I wish. But yes, finalist I'll take. I was very happy with that.
Flags fly forever, and getting to the finals, as most people know, is essentially like winning. That's the way it's been described to me about yourself and most of the finalists that have gone through any iteration of the self-published fantasy blog off. You start off there, and of course, no doubt, it helped catapult your series into some prominence. And then, of course, I believe at the time you already had the second book out or close to being out. And then you have to bring it home. Now, when you started this series, did you envision it to be 4 books? Did you plan for 3 and you said, I can't fit it all in? Did you think it was going to be 7 and you said, okay, well, maybe I'll cut this short? What was because I've always been curious as to, especially with series such as yours that are so epic in scope with so many characters, did you have a plan for how many books it was going to be?
It was always going to be a trilogy. So my book is a trilogy of 4 books. So mine's a case of expansion. It's probably got a character list big enough for 7 in actual fact. And I think that was, I think a lot of people do compare my writing to Game of Thrones. It definitely was a big influence. I did find the big cast was sometimes a problem, but other times it also creates lots of writing opportunities because you've got much more moving parts that can then swing the story in different ways. And I think that was ultimately useful. But I think the cast was too big in Hall of Bones, actually, for it to ever realistically be 3 books. And I had that realization by book 3 that, hell, I'm never going to close this down in a single volume. So by the time I started writing Lost Gods, which is the 3rd book, I knew I'd need a 4th to finish. But I think that there's an element of planning for me, but I think my techniques changed a bit. So Hall of Bones was kind of written very much throw ideas at the wall, see what sticks. Just write it. It was kind of a very free experience, and it took a long time because I didn't know what I was doing. But it was a very freeing, very free and fun experience. Sundered Souls was very tightly plotted, book 2. So I knew exactly what I did with that. I knew where I needed to get to and the journey the characters would go on. But during those first 2 books, I was still throwing ideas into the pot. And that's when I really got to book 3, I realised actually, that the story arcs are up here and it'll be like a nosedive. It would have to be almost like an asteroid destroyed the continent and 3 people walked out for it to have any chance of being closed out in a single volume. So again, that sort of changed things a bit. So books 3 and 4 were much more tightly plotted compared to books 1 and 2. And it was basically an increasing level of plotting, but still allowing that creativity to come in. So it was a planned 4-book series where I think I just outgrew the original 3 volumes, basically.
Yeah, I can completely understand that. I personally, as a fan of your work, am so happy it was at least 4 books because it allowed me more time to, immerse myself in your world. The 4th book, again, it was absolutely fantastic, Tim. I really, there's so many things that I want to give you praise for in this book, but I think the biggest things, going back to what we were just talking about with you mentioned this massive character list, like you managed somehow to give that quantity of characters each their moment. The characters that died, the characters that made it. You managed, to keep track of it all, to make in some cases, their final moments still seem poignant, that you cared about them, even if you had to jog memory and say, "Oh, who's this again? Oh, yeah." And the ones that, of course, that you as a reader, you develop, in your mind this relationship with, to see them, it was heartbreaking, of course, real tear jerking to see some of them go, or to see some of them triumph and achieve ultimate victory, or be maimed or wounded. So how did you manage to deliver on that? I think that takes a very special skill.
Yeah, with great difficulty is the honest answer. So I think it helps that I'm a natural planner in life generally. So I mean, there were tables and there were, so I always write a chapter summary before I start my novels. Doesn't necessarily mean that I then slavishly follow that, but it starts with, okay, how's the story going to be told? What happens in this chapter, and this chapter? It does list the events that are going to take place, and then I map across who's in those scenes, who are the characters, which characters does it involve. So there's like a skeleton that hangs on it. But then, I literally printed off the character sheet, for example, and it covered my entire dining room table in terms of A4 sheets, laying it all out. Have I forgotten anybody? Was a crucial question. There was even a table setting out who carries which magical weapon, because part of the problem is that every battle, the people that carry the various magical weapons that fight the giraffe, some of them pass away, but you're not going to get rid of that valuable magical weapon. So I had to not only know who had originally had that magical weapon, but who was now holding that magical weapon. And then when things really go down in that 4th volume, it all gets jumbled up again. So, I mean, it sounds stupid, but if you don't make a note of those things and have a repository of information rather to go back to, you can lose an hour trying to flick back through your manuscript, trying to work out when the hell that axe went from one person's dead hands to another. So yeah, an awful lot of I suppose I call it just writing logistics went into that. I don't think I'll ever write a book like this again. I must say, I think my character list I think it was a little bit of writing inexperience that had lots of happy coincidences that worked really, really well for the series, but it was very hard to do. So I think I like character-driven stories. That's really where I get my kicks. I'm going to try and condense character lists in future stories just to who I need, and then see how that works, because it was a bit immense at times. Don't say it didn't quite suck the joy, but it definitely took a lot of time to get right. And I'm seeing this coming full circle now, because we're doing the audiobook for Hall of Bones. That Kickstarter project was funded early this year, if you remember, and RJ Bailey's done the audio for them. In fact, I was proofing it this morning before this call started. And, again, just the logistics of getting RJ to record it and have to come up with different voices for not 100 people, but he needs different voices for at least 30. It's not easy. So I think I made some interesting creative decisions. I think Game of Thrones has a lot to answer for in this thing. And I'm one of these people, I don't really mind flicking to the back of the character sheet and seeing who's who. I quite like that. But I know a lot of people don't. So I think, if you like a big cast, read the character list would be my advice. My future works will be, I think, a little bit more just dialing it down, making it a little bit easier to digest, and then actually giving those characters their moments. If they do something terrible does happen to them, the reader's got a bit more of a chance to breathe and pause, because the body count of Broken Brotherhood is high, as you commented to me privately once you'd finished. And I make no apologies for that. It was always going to happen. It was always building up that way.
No, and it definitely wasn't a complaint. As I said, it was a masterful job of making me care about characters that perhaps I hadn't spent as much time with as with other characters. But a lot of why, and again, I said this is such a great job that you did, is that you had those interlinking relationships. In other words, that I could care about this particular character and they didn't die, but this character who that other character really cared about died, thus seeing the emotion with that character, making me really sad and feel bad for that character. And again, I said, as I said, I think it was just simply masterclass writing. Of all, I know this is perhaps a hard question to ask, but of all the 4 books in your series, which is your personal favorite, if you have one?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question to answer, actually. I think, I'm going to wave them in front. I'll use them as a prop because it'll help me give me some thinking time as I try and address that one. I think it's Hall of Bones was just fun to write. There was no expectation, there was no pressure. It was just having fun and writing for the sheer pleasure of writing it. So I think for me, I consider that book probably technically to be the weakest of the 4, but it still holds a place in my heart. And listening to the audio that RJ is recording now, I'm really falling back in love with that book, I've got to say, because it's almost like, for me, that the text is very familiar because I've reread that book. I've actually re-edited that book in terms of sweeping out as many errors as I can, as I learned more about self-publication, what that involves, and good techniques to try and avoid some of those pitfalls. So I'm very, very familiar with the wording of that book. But having somebody else narrate it, it's just I am so excited to get that out next year. So I think for me that's always going to be, right up there. Sundered Souls it's book 2, easy to write, again great fun. By that point, I'm trying to think where I was at this stage. July 21 it came out, so I'd have been I think I'd been still waiting for my Spiff Bow Fate at that point when that book came out. Lots of fun. I knew what I was doing with it. I think it's probably got my favourite antagonist in it, with Cyanide the Cold one. I really, really love, that particular character. So an undead Viking, basically. If that floats listeners' boat, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But he just was, again, a character that kind of came out of nowhere and almost stole the show for me. And I think he obviously plays a key part in that whole book. And I won't go into spoiler territory, but the influences ripple down through the rest of the series as well, which I found quite interesting. So that was fun to write, and in some ways, I think this was the book where I first felt, I actually know what I'm doing. Hall of Bones, I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. This one, I thought I can do this. I can write a follow up and finish. Let's wheel them out then. Third book, Lost Gods, stronger because it was a nightmare to how do I feel about this book? This book provoked a writing crisis for me, as I mentioned, I think, on a few blogs and other podcasts, that was the book where I was trying to position things to finish and didn't know how. So with the previous 2, it was ideas thrown at the wall, going with the flow. And I think that there's a very different technique to finishing a series. I'm really interested to see how you handle this, because you've got more books to do it, but you already need it at book 5. I'm sure you're already thinking about how that closeout happens in book 6 and 7. I was still learning that skill with Lost Gods, and to the point where I actually hated the book with a passion. So 2019, when that book first draft was written, I just couldn't see how to finish it, if I'm honest with you. So that book will always be a little bit jaded for me as a writing experience. But I think, give myself some space. I did a different project, gave myself a mental reset, came back to it. I'm really happy with that final version of that book, the way it ended up. It kind of became, I think it's the book where there's a massive spoiler because it's in the it's on the back cover blurb. You know, Hrothgar as the central character, I think he's more mature in this book, probably because I was becoming a more mature writer as well, and also he was getting older and had more, more life experience. So I suppose what we're trying to say, the key narrator voice changes, I think, in Lost Gods, and quite a few people picked up that they thought this was the most reflective and thoughtful book I'd written in the series, and a lot of them really liked that. So whereas the first two are a little bit crazy, this one is probably a bit less crazy, a bit more reflective, and you get to the characters, I think, get to breathe because the action slows. There's action in the book, but it's much more paced out because other things are starting to move, really, as part of that, getting them ready for the final book. And then, Broken Brotherhood, which is kind of brand spanking new. If I'm honest, that's my favourite because I think that book brings together the craft of knowing what the hell I'm doing to a level where it wasn't agony. So that was an easy book to write in many ways. It flowed really well. But I think also it kind of, it means there's resolution. It means that there's a closure to the stories. There's an answer to all the questions I wanted to answer. I don't answer them all, but I answer the ones I intended to answer. And it was just a wild ride to write and then read back afterwards, really. So I think for me, it probably brings back a bit more what people expect from my writing. A lot more action in this one, but I think a lot of the reflective stuff in Lost Gods is still there. Because you're getting that resolution to those character stories, and you're also getting, like you said, the fallout from when things, awful things happen to certain people as well, or equally the emotional high when things go their way. That there's a lot more closure. So for me, it's got more of the emotion in there as well. So it's that blend of action and emotion that I really want to try and get the series to be its hallmarks. I think you have that in Lost Gods, but you have that much more in Broken Brotherhood, despite it being a relatively shorter book. So does that answer the question? I've kind of forgotten what it was. I've just gone on a bigger. So yeah, that was the question. Which is your favourite? It's that one, and I think very closely followed by Hall of Bones, which probably is as it should be, really, I suppose.
Yeah, and that in itself, I think, is a testament to your writing when you, as the author yourself, can say that, because I think part of it is what you're saying. Ed, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that you start out as a fantastic writer, you've only got better. So by the time you came to the conclusion of the series, your last book was your best book. And I think that's what, as authors, we would all be aiming for. I know we all can have our little personal favorites because this book is quirky and something about it, like you said, the nostalgia. You said you're falling in love again with Hall of Bones, especially now with the audiobook coming out and hearing it again. Hearing it again is probably a very different experience. Hearing a narrator, with the characters. I have to say, with your series, to be honest with you, I honestly think that Lost Gods is my favorite. I was trying to ponder that before we came on this live today, and I think the reason why Lost Gods is my favorite is precisely what you said. I felt, I got to see Hrothgar have love.
Yeah,
I got to see him really. It's not. I mean, you've done such a spectacular job of depicting a character with disability, who was once very virile this warrior, and how he's adjusted and handled, and of course come into his own, despite facing that. But it was wonderful to see him, again, mature, and I think the romantic relationship, I think, brought out a lot of that maturity. Yeah. Right, and how that was handled. I think you did a great job there, of course, too, depicting the relationship. But one of my favorite relationships in the series. And I think you're because on top of starting out such a talented writer, and your writing only progressing, Lost Gods is at that near the pinnacle, I think. And like, if you consider Broken Brotherhood the pinnacle, Lost Gods it's right there, right? So I think, I think that's my favorite book of yours.
Well, it's really interesting to hear, actually, because I think in some ways it's the book that kind of slightly gets forgotten because it's not the end and it's not the beginning, is it? It is in that middle that middle space. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting going back to the first book. Of course, deliberately Rothko is going on a journey of evolution and change. That's kind of what I was intending to do, and how his changing mindset is meant to mirror the changing mindset of the society he's in. So that was always an important goal for me. But yeah, in the beginning, he's quite annoying, actually, at times, because he reflects the society he's in. He's very privileged. He has the world at his feet, really. He's got some pressure and responsibilities, but the world at his feet, and that first romantic relationship he has is actually very immature and quite, looking back at it now, relatively selfish. A little bit. It's a relationship for today. It's not really looking for tomorrow. And I think, both characters go into that with their eyes open and know that. But yeah, you're right. The sort of how his relationships change in book 3. I wanted that to be a very different relationship that reflected not just his changing, but also changing views about society. That kind of like it runs through that story, really. So so I'm glad the romantic, because I don't consider myself to be a romance writer. There's nothing spicy for anybody watching this either now or on repeat. I don't do. I have romance, but it's more about the relationship rather than the that being the be all and end all of the story itself. But I think you can't ignore that there's a lot of people in the mix here who are going to have relationships. That's just a natural part of things as well. So it felt right to sort of embrace that and include it. But I definitely didn't want him to repeat his relationship from the first book in that third one. I would set out for that to be really, really different.
No, and again, it was really that relation was really well done, and one of my favorite parts of Lost Gods and Broken Brotherhood. So now I'm going to put you on the spot again. You selected your favorite book. Who is your favorite character? You have a massive character list. Who is your favorite character in your series?
Go away. Well, that's really, really hard to answer. I suppose because obviously it's Hrothgar's story, so I suppose he's absolutely integral to how it works. And I think from a craft point of view, how Hrothgar's written, so the power of the sight, meaning he basically has whenever you see a different character, actually Hrothgar is there, and sometimes he's very there, isn't he? He's actually active but most of the times it's passive. So it has to be Hrothgar's story. So I think for that narrative device, he probably has to be the number one pick. But there are so many other characters that I think, particularly the ones that came out of nowhere and said, I quite like a bit of big piece of the stage plays. Like, really? It's a trilogy, I haven't got. Oh, okay. We'll have a fourth book. Why not? I think probably two that kind of came out that I really, really liked were Jury, who I think, again, I've said before, started off as a severed head in a sack. He was just the name given to a dead warrior that doesn't even appear in the actual book until he's already dead. But his name just sort of like fitted with another storyline that was kind of emerging. So Jury becomes basically a character who's quite a conflicted warrior from the Reesburg clan, who's got to deal with a lot of change that kicks off in that first novel, and then his story sort of like continues through the series in terms of what he has to face. He's trying to serve a new master, but yet also do the right thing, and that gave me lots and lots of writing opportunities. I always liked writing Randall, who was So he's the Vorund Jarl, and I think Douglas Lumsden described him as an absolute pro who was like getting increasingly frustrated with, why am I fighting for these guys? But yeah, he does it because actually it's his land that's under threat, and whatever you might think about the rights or wrongs of the conflict and the causes behind it, Randall is actually, again, he's trying to do the right thing. And I thought Jury and Randall are in some respects, they're almost the same character, but on the different sides of the battle lines. And how they deal with that is quite interesting. I always like writing Randall's scenes. He was always a good character to sort of play around with, really. I liked all of Ulfar's crew. So that was, they were trying to sort of, a lot of this starts off the noble warrior, and they are the ones that people kind of aspire to be. But actually, when Johan's placed in a situation where he's got to sort of respond to the difficulties that befall his clan, he takes everyone with skill, regardless of background. He pardons criminals. He gets whoever can fight on his behalf to fight on his behalf. And I think Ulfar would kind of encapsulated a different side of the the Brotherhood of the Eagle and the Allies. So it's not all just about clan politics. I could go on. Jolene, I do like writing her as well. Yeah. So I don't know if I lost your audio, PL, or are you just...
No, I muted myself because I just wanted to hear you talk.
Oh, fair enough. That's fine. Jolene was, again, a character I always knew would come into book 2, but I didn't realise that she played quite such a critical role in the rest of the story. So it very much, again, very much a background character stepping to the front. I think probably on balance, if I say Hrothgar has to be number 1, but I think number -1 is probably Nuna as well. Because again, for me, that was some deliberate choices. Nuna is very much a political pawn at the beginning of the story. She doesn't have much of a voice. But I can remember talking to Janny Wirtz about this actually when she was reading my first book, and I was really interested to know what she thought. And she said Nuna's the character she thought had the most agency of anybody in that story, because actually she has a place in society that's sort of dictated to her, but yet play uses that much more intelligent than people that actually have much greater status than her, that don't use their power as well or as wisely. And so actually Nuna's capability to play the long game makes her, as the series again progresses, she becomes a really, really powerful player. And that was always the intention. But in that first book, she never really emerges from the shadows, really, until books 2 and 3 in particular. That's when her story starts to take off. So I think Hrothgar and Nuna as the siblings, that they probably just edge it. But there's we could probably go on for another 30 minutes when we talk about all the characters I love, and it will probably change on different days, really. But I'll give, outside the main narrator, let's give it to Nuna.
Well, it's always interesting to hear what the author thinks about his own characters, and obviously, those are wonderful things. I personally, I thought about this prior to coming on this live, and I have to say, ultimately, Edda is my favorite.
Yeah, how can I not mention? Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it?
That Edda is, and I think I always say this, that without giving away spoilers, that characters who have their political savvy is their greatest attribute. Those characters always fascinate me, because typically, even if they're good characters, they have to enact their political machinations sometimes are somewhat sinister on face, right? Yeah. And even if it's for a greater good, what they're willing to do. I absolutely love those kind of characters. And Edda, for me, was she takes the crown. I have to say that Randall's number 2. Randall, from day one, I loved Randall, right? And for the specific reasons that you said, that he's a character who's fighting on the wrong side, but for the right reasons, and he somehow manages to really maintain this integrity and this high morality, even though he's working for this evil boss, right? And I think that is that's one of the reasons why I love him. I love the fact that he's older, he's jaded, he's been there, done that. He, I really identify with him in that way as well. And the fact that he's very self-aware. He has this, and he has this. There's an underlying compassion with Randall, and a straightforward. I really, and a courage, right? Because he's one of the few characters that isn't just a lapdog. He stands up when he knows, my next words may be my last, considering who I'm dealing with is my boss. But he still says them. He still tells them like it is, and that takes a lot of courage. Randall. I love Randall. I was praying through the whole. Please don't kill Randall. I was just praying that he would make it. To the end. And I have to say, third is Jolene, and I think she really came on for me. And Lost Gods is when she went to another pedestal for me. And I think the beauty of that relationship, as I said before, and the fact that she's this tough warrior, yet always having to prove herself, always having to prove that she's worthy because of her heritage, right? Always having to, but yet, still, again, the tenderness, that relationship, and seeing, she's a very good person. Yeah. And so again, and this may surprise you, Sinar the Cold is number 4.
Right. Yeah.
He was such an amazing character. He's such an amazing character. Like you said, this undead Viking that's just, but characters, Machiavellian type characters, Ruthless type characters tend to fascinate me. So, I Sinar the Cold was awesome.
Yeah. Those two, haven't you? Really, I can't believe I didn't mention Etta, because that's during the audio book. Of course, RJ's voicing her for the first time. Although you do get a snip of that, a sort of taste of that in A Roll of the Dice, the short story collection. So Etta does feature in those prequel stories, actually, in one of those tales. But you're right. I think RJ's absolutely nailed the. She's on your side, isn't she? No, she is. Is she? Yeah. I think he's actually really got a sense of, like you say, the duality of Etta's nature, that she has to, she exists in the world that the straightforward warrior can't exist, and she has a different battlefront, and she's not effective in her job if she doesn't, think about all possibilities and play, to a certain extent, play both sides or play the percentages. She's just a totally different character, and yeah, because she's quite old, she could have come across as a bit doddery and a bit, like your grandma, I suppose. That was that I said to RJ when I was briefing. I said, she can't sound like that under any circumstances, because you've got to actually be a little bit afraid of this woman. And he's really nailed her voice and personality in the story. It's brilliant, actually. The other thing, I've just had time to think about who the heck else is in this book. The other person I will just mention is Gortar Valroofson, who's he kind of comes in and out the story. He's not the viewpoint, or but at times he plays a critical role. And I've all the fact that from the get-go, Gortar is effectively Hrothgar's rival. He's a rival family in Riesberg that they think they should be ruling rather than Hrothgar's ruling family. So there's an immediate bit of tension there. And again, going back to Hall of Bones, seeing where all that started and how the seeds of that flow through the rest of the books is quite satisfying, because I have a soft spot for him. Again, RJ's voicing him brilliantly. Again, he really comes across as sort of a bit an outsider, but somebody who thinks he should rule, which is really where he comes from. He hasn't got the political skills of somebody like Etta, but he's got the money, he's got the might, and he's got the determination. So he's got 3 out of the 4 key attributes. So he really wants to rule, and that kind of I always felt that character was always very true to himself in all the different situations. It creates that dynamic, obviously, within the Brotherhood. Ultimately, there's that dynamic between Johan on one side, Gortar. Both need each other, but both know ultimately there's going to have to be a reckoning in relation to what's gone before as well. So that was a really fun part of the story to write with him as that central character.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I was remiss, and I guess if we want to round it up to a top 5. I'll put Johan as my 5th, and because what I loved about how you wrote Johan, in a lot of ways, I felt he's very understated as essentially the leader of the titular brotherhood. That's the title of the entire series, and he. I think I wrote this to you in email when I was reading the arc. I realized that you look back, I hadn't taken stock until that it was a moment of reading Broken Brotherhood, of the totality of what this has cost him, and even just in the leadership, the nominal leadership role that he's had to deal for 4 books with these warring, competing interests within the people he's leading. He's had to fight off the external threats. He's had to deal with loss. Johan has been through a lot, right? And you wrote this one passage where basically you could just tell he's just exhausted, right? Like he's just tired, and that was so well done. But until then, I, as a reader, although he's one of my favorite characters, I neglected to assess the cost that this entire thing has taken on him as the head, the
Yeah.
nominal head, right? And I think that was something that you did so well, that Johann was in a lot of ways very long suffering, and having to hold this disparate group together, almost by force of will, and he was so successful. He was a great leader, and that's one of the things I admired about that character.
Yeah, Johann's an interesting one because he is effectively the hero of the story. But I do like Johann. Don't get me wrong. I think he is a great character. But I think if I told the story from his perspective, it would have been quite predictable. So Johann is the steadying influence on the Brotherhood, on the Alliance. He, like you say, he keeps it. That's his job, is to keep that together. But yeah, Hrothgar's voice was just more interesting. So in that sort of beginning of the, choosing Hrothgar as the narrator is partly because, first of all, I didn't want him to be the person envisaged as being chief. So he was the second son. So he's got a supporting role. He's not the main character, and even within his own family. And even when events start to propel Johann into more of the forefront of what comes about, I think if we told all of that story from Johann's point of view, it just wouldn't have had the nuance that Hrothgar brings to the tale. So they're really quite good counterbalances for each other. So at times, obviously, Johann's very prominent. It was actually not that prominent for good chunks of Lost Gods in reality, isn't it? There's elements here where actually, again, having a big cast, you can put people into the foreground or pull them into the background because won't give others their moment. But yeah, it was interesting. So he was all Johann was always the hero, but like you say, heroism and leadership at what cost is really, I suppose, the fundamental questions that you're left out trying to answer with his journey, really, aren't you?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So I want to say, now you finished the series. You have other works. And as you know, I cannot say enough good things about a specific book that you've written, A Quiet Vengeance. I mean, it's in my top 5 indie books of all time, indie self-published fantasy books of all time. A Quiet Vengeance is just, I could go on for days. You might have to have a separate. Honestly, we might have to have a separate live one day about A Quiet Vengeance, because for me, it is just that good. And I'm not disparaging the Brotherhood of the Eagle series at all. That is one of my favorite self-published fantasies of all time. But you know how I feel about A Quiet Vengeance, right?
Yeah, no, I get it.
But now that you have these 4 marvelous books and this series complete, I believe that we all find our audience, and we also all, typically because of our signature series, you become known for certain things. And I think for me, if I was going to characterize what Brotherhood of the Eagle is known for amongst its fans, and of course this is my opinion as one of the fans, exceptional action scenes, battle scenes. Absolutely, without question, some of the best prologues in fantasy anywhere. Self-published, traditional, whatever. Some of the best prologues I've ever read anywhere, of any type of literature. Compelling drama, a huge cast and character list.
Yeah, check.
and of course, ultimately, when you consider the totality of each book, the George R. R. Martin, political machinations, and I'll put this as one thing: political machinations, but also giving absolutely zero thought or caring to killing off characters and making the readers cry.
Yeah, I've just come back. Not zero thought, PL, but yeah, there's but yeah, I'm not afraid to do it. I'll grant you that. Sometimes it's not easy.
So those are the 5 things that I would say that when I think about the Brotherhood of the Eagle series, that's what I think about. Do you agree? Is there something else you believe that your series should be known for? Perhaps an element that maybe it doesn't get enough. There's not enough chatter about this aspect of your writing. Is it, what do you think about your series and what it's about, and what it would be known for, like kind of
Yeah.
a.
I think you've summarised it pretty well, and I suppose that's the first thing to say is that everyone's summary of that will be accurate because it will be whatever they've taken from the series themselves. That's I suppose just the subjective nature of art. I think I'd probably give you a yes to everything you've just said. Probably the bit that perhaps other readers pick up more is the I think just the fact that it's very character driven. So although you describe it in those stirring terms, a lot of the time people are just having a chat, and that can be the entire chapter often. It's just conversation. But if you think about it, that's actually how the world works. Actually, most things happen through conversation and dialogue and those kind of things. It's not. So I wanted to give some space to that. So yeah, for me, they're all very character led stories. So that's and a lot of people do compare my writing to Robin Hobb. She was a huge influence on me, so it's not entirely surprising. I think particularly that first book, it's very probably quite notable because it's quite political. So I think if you like intrigue, utter scheming, that the clan's trying to get vying for supremacy amongst each other. If you like intrigue, and I think the plot going off in unexpected directions. This is this is a series for you. If you like a much more straightforward tale, clear good and evil, something a bit lighter, probably not actually, because it is at times that it's quite heavy going in terms of, just like you say, the emotional toll. Things you think are really set in stone can be, people can die or terrible things can happen, and that can often spin the story in a totally different way. So if you want a more relaxing read, this may not be the one for you. I think, for me, it's tonally, it's the TV show Vikings, it's Game of Thrones is a huge influence. Those two things definitely come through together. I think the other writer that people keep picking out is John Gwynne, who I actually didn't start reading until about 3 years, no, more like 5 years after I started writing that series. But I think what John Gwynne does very, very well is he uses tropes really intelligently and often confounds your expectations. And I think in that sense, I like using tropes, but I try to give them a fresh spin. And I think probably John Gwynne is a master at doing that. So again, some influences there from him as well. So it is quite a complex series. There's no two ways about it, and I think different people take different things from it as well at the end of the day. But I think that's probably the best way I can try and summarize it.
Well, and again, Tim, your series is phenomenal. I feel very humbled and privileged, to be your friend and to have had, arcs of these books and to be able to read them in advance and to be able to provide, reviews. When I get the opportunity to write a review of your books, I find myself, hoping I can do them justice because, again, the writing is marvelous. It's gotten better with each book in the series. As I said, you've truly closed it out in grand fashion with Broken Brotherhood. I hope you're proud of this achievement, and I hope that you, you're, as the years go on, you look back and say, wow, that was pretty well done, giving yourself a pat on the back, because it is a fantastic series.
Yeah, like I said, I'm still mentally adjusting to the fact it is finished, actually. But yeah, that's very kind of you. And I think I will just add, you mentioned before, we are part of the same sort of writing group. We've all got links to different people in the writing and reading fraternity. But I don't think actually I would have finished the series without people like you in my corner helping support me. And I do say that actually in the acknowledgements of Broken Brotherhood, because it's true that that they're not. Yeah, I think writing a book is hard. Writing another book is hard, and it just becomes it's a strange thing. You become better at doing something, it becomes harder to do. And I don't know if anybody that's not a writer can entirely understand that. But I think because you learn the craft, you know more of what should be in. So I know I've made mistakes in all of those. I probably wouldn't do if I was writing that book today. But that's the book, isn't it? But as you go further into that journey, your skill level increases, and you want to try and make sure every book matches that. And so it becomes more of a pressure. And I think that's where writer support groups, networks, frankly, people willing to take an arc, that's a commitment. Actually, thank you for doing that, because I tell you, until I get those first few art reviews, I think that book is terrible. I look at this book that maybe I should burn it, because I've lost all sense of perspective at that point after 13 years and numerous revisions and listening, doing an audio edit on it for the fourth time and still finding typos and all those kind of things. The negative aspect of writing, the critical element that you need, can be a bit of an inhibitor as you're trying to get over those final yards. So yeah, honestly, people that are willing to take an early look and say nice things, say I liked it. It makes the difference between sort of pressing publish and like delaying it for another year. Yeah, that kind of thing. So yeah, if you're a writer, I think I would always say you start in isolation because you have to, but you move into a space where actually to sort of if you're serious about doing this and putting book after book out and releasing every year or thereabouts, you need a good supportive network to help that creativity and help you get over those moments of crisis, really. And hopefully we do the same for you, PL, with yours, because it's I can just imagine the phenomenal amount of work that it takes to write the style you write they're not easy projects, are they, those by any stretch?
No, I absolutely concur, Tim, and right back at you and you specifically and all the members of our member group. I would not have everyone be going on and with me having 7 in the hopper. You specifically and all the member members have been instrumental in motivating, guiding, encouraging those days when we talked about this in the Marmite chat, when you're just feeling despondent about a bad review, or you feel you're not getting the sales you need, or and especially for the advice and the guidance, and it's just been so instrumental, and I can't thank you enough. And like I said, honored to be your friend. Like I said, the highlight of Worldcon for me this past year was there were many highlights, but meeting you certainly was up there.
That's
because
I'm a highlight someone's trip.
But I do want to encourage everyone as we're winding down. If you like Norse-inspired fantasy, and as Tim had mentioned, the John Gwynns, if you like the political scheming and machinations on the level of A Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones by George R. R. Martin, if you like the depth and the breadth and the poignancy of character moments and development like Robin Hobb, this is the series for you. This series is the series for you. Read The Brotherhood of the Eagle. You won't be disappointed. I certainly have not been. I've enjoyed every book. I can't wait to read more from you, Tim. I still have to read the short stories. I was thinking, I think we were having a discussion today about how much we've read among the Marmite group of each other's works, and I keep forgetting I haven't read Roll of the Dice yet, so I need to get to that. Short stories set in the Brotherhood of the Eagle universe, and of course, because you know how much I love Quiet Vengeance, which technically is part of your overall universe. I am just praying that book 2 and perhaps the third book will come in that saga, because oh my gosh, I absolutely love that. So I suggest everyone who is watching live or who will watch this later, just simply go to Goodreads and Google Tim Hardie, put in Tim Hardie in the search bar, and pull up his books and start buying, because you won't be disappointed. It truly, the section of my shelf that has Tim's books is near and dear to my heart, and I hope to have an entire shelf dedicated to his work someday, because he's that good. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Tim. As always, it's an honor and a pleasure. I just want to give you an opportunity as we're signing off to tell everybody where they can find you or follow you on social media, where to buy your books. Can we get, if someone wants autographed signed copies, how they go about that? Maybe what you have upcoming in terms of lives or things that you're doing in the space. So
so where to find me, first of all? It's basically always a variation of this: Tim Hardie, author, Hardie spelled IE. So that'll find you if you basically put that into your search bar. You'll bring me up on X, which is where I kind of started my social media journey. But I have dispersed myself for various reasons. So you'll also find me on Facebook as Tim Hardie Author Public is the official title. And then I've got I'm on Blue Sky, again under the similar handle, and I'm also recently joined Instagram, Kicking and Screaming, as I'm drawn into that place. So Instagram tends to be more of just my announcements. Probably Blue Sky and X, where I'm probably a bit more interactive in terms of interacting with the wider writing community. So you can find me on all those different platforms. I've also got a website, which is where again that brings everything together. So that's at timhardieauthor.co.uk. You asked about signed copies. It's an interesting one. I am debating how to logistically do that. So I am hoping to do some events next year where I will be selling direct. So I haven't really got a mailing solution kind of sorted out yet in terms of buying direct from me, but I think that probably will happen. That's part of the plan. So now I've got a full series. I need to start thinking a bit more about how I sort of manage some of those practicalities. But I think at the moment probably trying to track me down at any conferences where I'm selling would be a good start, really. And if you bought a copy and never bump into me, I'm always very happy to sign it as well. So and that has happened. That was an author first at Worldcon, actually, where somebody literally tracked me down and asked me to sign the book, which was I could stand a bit more of that, I've got to say. So it feels in some ways it feels like it's still early days. It kind of feels that the last 4 or 5 years have gone in a flash. But I really would like to. I think be a bit more accessible. At the moment, though, if you want to get my stuff, primary marketplace to go is Amazon, where you can get the paperback ebook and in some cases the audiobook version as well.
Fantastic. And just so you know, folks, in this video, in the actual links on YouTube, you'll see all of Tim's social media links, his website, etc. In that video. I just want to quickly, as we're signing off, some people in the live here, the wonderful, wonderful John A. Douglas, fabulous supporter as always. He himself is an amazing booktuber and author. Check out his work and his YouTube channel. Good morning, happy Sunday morning to you as well, John. And I know it's near the end. So John says I joined at the right time with a little laugh. Yeah, hey, better late than never. And you know what? Once it's done, you can always go back and watch the recording. So, just appreciate you joining, period, John. It means a lot. So thank you so much. I can't wait to get to John's books, hopefully planning definitely for this year to do that. And another wonderful person, member of the page chewing community, Thomas Devins. Awesome to see you here, Thomas. How you doing? Says, I always seem to pop up on these at the end myself. And not an issue, Thomas. Always great to see you. Thanks so much for checking out the live. And another incredible author whose books I have to get to this year. That is definitely a resolution of mine. The amazing JCM Byrne, who has a very, very, very popular series going. One of the hottest indie series out there. Check out his work. He says, hey, gents, I've come at the very last minute too. It's all good, JCM. Thanks so much. We appreciate the support. Thank you for coming by. Once again, check out JCM's books. They're fabulous. And John just adds, I tip my hat. Just thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate it from a great fellow booktuber. That kind of praise always means a lot. Tim is an amazing guest. This has been so wonderful. Anytime I selfishly get to chat to Tim, it's a good day. So I'm really happy. It's always great for us to catch up on a personal, professional level. So, and I can't wait for the next time we see each other in person, because like I said, it was a big highlight for me. So, Tim, thank you so much for coming and being so generous with your time. It means a lot. I wish you, of course, all the success in the world in your upcoming writing, and with continuing to make Brotherhood of the Eagle, an extremely popular fantasy series. It's so deserving. It is just a fabulous series. As I said, highly recommended. And can't wait to see what else you put out next.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great, Pete. I've really enjoyed it. And I think we'll have to reverse this next year and chat a bit about your series too. So it's that's the fun thing about writers connecting and stuff, is that you discover a whole host of really, really good books, don't you? So that's been fun today. I've really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you so much. And yes, I agree with this final comment I'll put up. Yes, Tim is really good people, John. I totally concur. So as I said at the beginning of this podcast, I'm P.L. Stewart. the channel is the Drowned Kingdom Saga 7847, where I do things such as this, 6 Elementals interviews with wonderful creators such as Tim. This day is rather jam-packed. I have 2 more creatives I'll be speaking to in a rapid succession today, so please tune in for those lives if you are available. For me, the books, the Drowned Kingdom Saga, yes, I'm crazy. I'm writing 7 books in the series. Book 4 has been published. Book 5 will be out in the spring of 2025. It's entitled The Pack of Wolves. And yes, the Drowned Kingdom Saga is on track. And God willing, as long as there's breath in my body, that series will be finished. Like Tim, I will get to one day celebrate in 2027 when the series is published in its entirety. So, so yeah, my series is still going strong. In terms of social media, X, I still lurk there. It's at PL Sturt Writes for almost all my handles. I'm on Twitter, now Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, and I mean, I'm sporadically on all of them, probably more on X, Twitter, and now Blue Sky. I'm trying to establish a bit more of a presence, but we'll see. The social media sphere keeps changing, right? So we never know what's going to happen. The website is www.plstart.com. That's where you can find out more about the saga. Also, if you're looking for author signed copies, there is a link on the website where you can get in touch with me, and we can send those out to you. I'm also an assistant editor for the marvelous Before We Go blog, led by the incredible Beth Tabler. So, and all my Before We Go friends, shout out to all of them. You guys are amazing, and of course, Beth is incredible, an incredible leader. Beth also is a leader at Grimdark Magazine. So, for my written reviews, typically Goodreads and on Before We Go blog, that's where you find my written reviews. And finally, they sound like me. As long as the breath of my body, I'm always saying, to next year, unless I have retired. Yep, that's pretty well it, my friend. We got to keep going. We got to keep writing.
I got to say.
We got to keep writing. So, all right, folks. So this has been marvelous. Once again, Tim, thank you so much for joining. And we will see you soon, Tim, in the future. And anybody who wants to tune the channel, again, 2 more broadcasts later. So I'll see you all later on this morning. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, PL.
Thank you so much, Tim. Take care, everyone.